proceed to a public testimony on the agenda items. Is there any public testimony?
Yes, Chair. First testifier is Debbie Anderson.
Hello. Just flew in from Hilo. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Coach Anderson. I'm a nationally board certified teacher. I've been coaching high school athletics for 18 years, including Brian Clay, the world's greatest athlete. For over a dozen years, I've taught credit PD courses and mentored over 300 teachers. The national board contracted me for 4 summers as an assessor and 2 as a trainer of assessors. They only take 7 librarians from across the country. We wanted to talk today about the ESSA opportunity to revise the BOE Joint Strategic Plan, particularly 2B staff success. And the primary concern is that the purpose of human resources evaluation is improvement. So I want to address 3 different types of models. The most effective, one that has had significant potential, and some changes that might really help what we're doing here in Hawaii. So the most effective model that's currently in the United States is the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. There are more than 200 studies that verify that the teachers who are accomplished teachers through that program make a huge difference in their classrooms. And that's been over a quarter of a century proven track record. So it's also a very clear definition of what accomplished teacher is. One of the things that we'd like to consider is that involvement of the Hawaii State Teachers Association, or HSTA, and BCTs would be a very great group to be involved in looking at how to help with ESSA implementation. The distinction with this group compared to some of the others that you might have heard of is that any and every teacher, after 3 years of being a licensed teacher, can apply and work toward becoming a nationally board certified teacher. So it's an equitable process of trying to help everybody improve. I wanted to also talk about a model that showed a great deal of potential. From 2009 to 2014, Kamehameha schools attempted to implement a performance management evaluation system. They based it solely on the framework from Charlotte Danielson. And they had rubrics that they used to build capacity building. They wanted them to be research-based and dynamic, able to change however needed to be, reflecting best practice. If you can go ahead and look, one of the pages I have is the list of all of the forms that Kamehameha put out over that 5-year period that teachers had to work through. And I have the website cited where you guys can go and look at some of those forms. What happened? The Kapa'ina, which means striving high. The teachers had to use Blackboard to store electronic portfolio evidence, documents, and files. And when they took testimony from the teachers about how is it working, it was way too much of a burden for everybody. So instead of helping them be more effective, it didn't help them be more effective. So I prepared a 4-minute testimony because I was ready for tonight, so I didn't realize.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So it basically was sunk by the weight of too many forms to be practical for a classroom teacher. So we're asking the board to consider some rewrites to policy 2055, particularly the 50% that's based on personal evaluation, rating on performance measures, which really are not in the control of a teacher and are not statistically valid. So those clauses are no longer mandated under ESSA. We'd like them to be reconsidered. I'd like to point out a couple of major design flaws in the current EES educator evaluation system. And I put on the top of the page a graphic that's repeated twice in the manual. So this is what they do. They basically claim that this is a 5-point scale. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a 0, and then there's a 2, a 3, and a 4. And it's probably really obvious for anyone to tell what number's missing in that 5-point scale. There is no 1. So one of the questions the board had asked after they saw the last results of the teacher ratings is, why are there so many up on the higher end? Because if you're really designing a system that's giving you feedback that's really quality for needing for improvement, that one spot is really crucial. You want to have something there between totally unsatisfactory or non-participating and the 40%. There's nothing there. The other key piece that's really important to understand is how, so I'm a certified Danielson trainer. Kamehameha came and trained NBCTs who are willing to be coaches for our peers to help them become better teachers. So one of the things that's really important to understand is what is basic in the Danielson model. So when you become a brand new teacher, it takes a few years to get your feet on the ground to become effective. It's hard that first bit of time. So, and also, like at my school, we had 14 teachers in 6th grade, all moved around to different subject areas for next fall. Danielson says it will take every teacher that's sitting in a new job, a new grade level. Say you got moved from 6th grade down to kindergarten. It will take you 3 years to get your feet rolling to be able to make effective. What the Department of Ed has proposed is that we only give a pay increase to people who are the effective and highly effective. And we're talking about shortages, people leaving the profession in the first 5 years, and we're telling people who are gutting their hearts out there in the basic that they're not worth the time that they're putting in isn't valued. That's not quality human resource management. So those are the two types of things I wanted you, this rubric right here is both the non-classroom teachers, the portfolios, the 0, 2, 3, 4, and is also the Danielson observation. So this is a clear spot where there needs to be change. So as the consideration is going forward, let's just take what we have and keep it moving. What we're trying to say is there are some really significant changes that need to be made. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take questions.
Your written testimony has been distributed, so we have all of that.
Thank you
very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Next testifier is Vanessa Ott.
Good morning, Ms. Ott. Your testimony has also been, I appreciate you putting it all in writing, because I know it's a lot of information, but it's also been distributed to the members.
Okay, thank you. And I have something to say that's not in the written testimony.
No problem.
Thank you. I'm Vanessa Ott. I'm a community member. And this morning I happened to see additional, the attachment that was to the notice of the meeting, which wasn't there when the notice was put out. And I don't think it was attached until Friday. So having those things when the notices come out would be very helpful. I might have been able to include this in my written testimony. My concern is that the way that changes happen are not including the public, not encouraging the public. For example, in Superintendent Matayoshi's letter to the board about the DDL issue, I discovered, I might have known this and forgotten, that there was something written about proposed policy back in September and submitted to the board. But if you go to the DOE website, you don't know any of this is happening. There's no way really for the public, who might be retired teachers or principals, who have interesting things to say about upcoming policy changes, but there's no encouragement. There's no Facebook. The DOE Facebook could be used for that, saying, hey, you know, we're looking for input on these different issues. And so I feel that if we want to have significant change, then we have to change the way that we communicate and work together, all of the stakeholders. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Next testifier is Cheryl Burghardt.
Good morning.
Yeah. I have to tell you that I got mixed up and I thought I was here for the staff meeting and not the HR, so I'm going to clarify. So I'm going to go with just something I wanted to make clear. And I brought, since I'm an elementary teacher retired, if you don't know this story, it's the story of the OPA, and they needed help and they kept going to everyone and looking for help, and finally they got help. As a retired teacher, DOE, 40 years of teaching totally around the continent as well as Japan, I feel that the story reflects my profession. I feel that we're consistently trying to do all these things we're asked. We're trying to be successful. We're trying to help our kids. And we continue to go to people, the people that we trust, the people that we need to help us with the tools, like you guys who give us the resources and all those things. And we continually keep getting, not purposely, because I don't think anybody does that, but because of situations, we keep getting, put aside, or with the evaluations, everything you've all heard before, because I've been to the BO meetings, and I know you guys hear these things, and I know you take them to heart. But what I see is that what I hear here doesn't get reflected all the way down to where the kids are. And I have to ask you always, pehe na keiki, pehe the teachers, na kumu, and I know in your hearts that you always want to do the right thing, but right now things are not good. We need to stop losing our teachers. I know a particular first-year teacher who is doing a rocking awesome job and is struggling every day because of the system. And every day she meets the needs of her kids in amazing ways. And I know you know that too. So I'm just here to tell you that I'm here, as Ms. said. Ms. said we are retired teachers, and not that we have a lot of extra time because we're volunteering for a lot of things, but we're here for you guys. And I really wish that, I know Patricia has, used some of my ideas for ELL and stuff, but we're here. Please use us. This is our profession. It means a lot to me. Everybody asks me, and I'm just going to close now, how did you stay in education for 40 years? I can't answer that question. All I know is that it's been the best thing, and we need to save it. And we need to save the kids, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Next testifier is Murray Ellsworth.
Hello again.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Marie Ellsworth from Waikea High School and from the Big Island. Came all the way here. I just wanted to know if you did receive my written testimony and if you have it in front of you.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to alert you to those charts that I put in my testimony regarding research about the effects of testing on teacher morale and how it literally is chasing people away from the profession. Those are some studies that would be really excellent to look into. They're lengthy studies, and I've been through them quite extensively and tried to pull out key bullets of things that would affect our state if we continue with the testing that we're going with for the strategic plan. We really need to reconsider the board policy 2055 because we have the freedom now to delink teacher evaluations from testing. And anyway, if you also look in the bullets there, the American Statistical Association has said that VAM, which we call here in Hawaii, student growth percentage, right? That VAM is really statistically unreliable and invalid. So for us to be using those measures from the teacher evaluation is really not a good idea. SLOs, which is a big part of a classroom teacher's evaluation. SLOs are also from the Department of Education at the federal level. They actually commissioned a study of all the research, a whole research, look at all the research that's ever been done. And they actually put out that it is not easy to make it valid or reliable, and they did not recommend that anybody use it for teacher evaluations. And here in Hawaii, we're actually tying it to pay as well. So it's really not a good idea. I just wanted to alert you to those studies because there's many more, but I wanted to pick out what I thought was the best one and make it as easy for you as possible to review it because it is quite some lengthy research. Standardized tests are made for a specific purpose, and the purpose is not to evaluate teachers. So we really need to think about that as well. I hope that you would look over this with really good eyes because I know you care so much and you really want to have the best teacher force possible. By doing this, it feels to the teachers insulting, especially to the best teachers in the profession, and it's making them feel like, why am I even doing this? They feel unappreciated. In any field, in any professional field, they do not use quantitative measures to evaluate workers. Qualitative measures is the best way, unless you're talking about factory piecework, which we're not talking about. We're talking about kids. So we really want to look at qualitative measures. So please reevaluate, and with this wonderful opportunity for ESSA to give us the freedom as a state to be on the cutting edge, to get rid of teacher evaluations being tied to student test scores. It's going to be the way to go. And I would like to see Hawaii be one of the first states to do this. It's been done in other states, but I want to see Hawaii up there with the other states as well. Thank you so much for listening.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Chair, there are no more testifiers.
Okay, thank you for testimony this morning. We'll proceed with our agenda. We are at the approval of meeting minutes of February 16, 2016. The minutes have been circulated. Is there a motion to approve? Second. Moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carried. We now at discussion items. Presentation on new metric for Department of Education scorecard, measuring progress against desired outcomes of the Board of Education, Department of Education Joint Strategic Plan for Goal 2 Staff Success.
Good morning, Barbara Creed, Assistant Superintendent, Office of Human Resources. So the first agenda item today is actually related to the current strategic plan and is somewhat a follow-up from the presentation that I did several months ago on the department's scorecard for the Goal 2 staff success. So at the time, we presented the metrics that the department was using and the progress noted on the website for most of the targets in the current strategic plan. But the one that we were still sort of struggling with how to effectively measure is improvements in the quality and quantity of job applicants. And over the course of about 6 months, we came up with a number of different ideas and had challenges either with our data systems or how to otherwise collect the data. And we had been and continue to use a metric internally that I personally find very valuable, and we're actually hoping to use that as our scorecard metric. So unless this committee or the board has a concern, that's what this presentation here is about. And as you can see in the memo, the data that we're really relying on that we think is really critical is on the first day of school each year, what do our teacher vacancies look like? And what do our filled positions look like? So part of that is literally how many positions are filled or what percentage of positions are filled. And that really goes to the quantity element of the target and the metric. But the other part of it is what are the qualifications of those teachers who are sitting in those positions. So what we've been working with is not quite the same as licensed, unlicensed, because to us, in terms of from a human resources standpoint, what's the most important quality or experience of a teacher coming in? It is, have they completed a state-approved teacher education program? We see, for example, that we have whatever number of teachers coming in each year already licensed and experienced from other states, and a number of those will have completed the SATEP, as we call it, but just not yet gone through, for example, just paying the license fee, literally. So what we've been working with and will continue to work with internally and hope to use on the scorecard is what you see here. So for this school year, and we use August 1 as the standard, what we equivalent for first day of school, for all of our teacher positions, 96.4 of the positions were filled. But of those of all of the positions, 93.4% were filled with those who had actually completed the state-approved teacher ed program. And we typically do separately look at and analyze special education because, as you're aware, as I think we're all aware, we have unique challenges there and even greater concerns in terms of retention and recruitment for special ed teachers. So we break that out separately and focus on that separately. So what you see here, the 10-month special ed teachers, which is pretty much our classroom teachers, we have a lower filled rate overall, higher vacancy rate, and we have a significantly lower percentage of our teachers in special ed who have completed the state-approved teacher ed program. So this is the metric that we'd like to use on the scorecard going forward. Although I'd like to clarify, particularly knowing that we do have people here testifying on the strategic plan going forward, which we appreciate, and I'll make sure others within the DOE have access to their testimony as well. We don't know, obviously, what the result of the strategic plan review and extension will be. So this is, again, related to the current plan, but whatever the future strategic plan looks like within the Office of Human Resources, we rely very heavily on these metrics you see here, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Barbara. Just a couple, I just want to clarify. So the SATEP completed the night, like in the baseline. Is it 93.4% of the 96.4, or is it 93.4 of the total position?
It's 93.4% of the total positions.
Position.
Right.
So another way of reading this is that of the 100% of positions, 3.6% are not filled, and another 3% filled, or were filled as of that date. Another 3% were filled by less than fully qualified person.
Right, that, yes,
So
that's
say that
right.
would be fully.
Right, and again, this is as of the first day of school.
Yes,
I mean, the
understand.
data,
So you get better
yeah.
after that, but the point is,
Right.
given that that's where we stood at the big, on the opening
Correct.
of school.
Correct.
Okay, because that's, I'm glad you're doing it that way, because that way you can back out, you know what percentage is not filled and what percentage is filled by less than fully qualified.
Right.
And especially, I think that's especially, well, it's important for all of them, but especially special ed. Just an observation, given all the testimony about special ed, I thought it was worse. I mean, the way, I guess we only, I mean, if you're in that school where the position isn't filled, that's 100% for you. I mean, it's bad
Right.
for those individuals. But system-wide, I mean, we would like to be higher, but given all the horror stories, I thought it was going to be in the 80s. So at least it's not as bad as I thought, but thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So do you have a similar way of monitoring your EL teachers as you do with your SPED in terms of qualified EL teachers and qualifications for them?
I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to get back to you. I've never seen data that breaks it down that way, and I'm not sure how our data system captures it, but I can find out and do a follow-up response through Allison.
Okay, thank you. Because similarly to SPED, I mean, there's some federal requirements in terms of the qualifications for our EL teachers.
Any other questions? Would it be useful to look at the statistics in the middle of the school year to see if it improves?
I know that they do improve as of October 1st, because we do track that. That's the date on which positions are sold. But we can pull the data at any time in the school year, I believe. If you'd like, I can pull a report. If you give me a date, we can do a follow-up report and submit that through Allison as well.
Well, we used the beginning of the school year as I guess let's to take stock as to where we stand, and then at some point the principals will try to fill vacancies that exist within the respective schools. I'm just interested to see whether the percentage of the positions get filled, but whether the percentage of those teachers who are from an approved program, whether that remains the same.
As a general note, I have noticed that as we have, the later in the year that a position is filled, especially for the special ed, the more likely that they're coming in without the SATEP.
Okay. And that is in the 80 percentile range of those teachers?
That I don't know.
Well, that's what it says here.
Well, this is on day
SPED
one.
teachers, yeah, but day one, so that would increase, so the percentage of state-approved teacher education program would go down in number.
Right,
And that's in the 80 percentile right now on day one, right?
correct.
Okay.
Although, sorry, no, because, so when you look at the 85.7% on day one,
Right,
most of those will remain for the school year. We may lose a few for whatever reasons.
right, but if they
But
fill,
then what comes in will be some coming in with the SATEP, which raises your 85.7%, and some coming in without the SATEP, which doesn't affect the SATEP completed column, but does affect the total filled column. So you don't go below 85.7% because that is of the total 100% positions.
well, if the number of teachers come in late without the credentials, wouldn't the percentage of those that are approved go down?
But some who are coming in do have, I think I'm doing the math right, but don't hold me to it. But some that are coming in after the first day of school do have the SATEP completed. So the 85.7%, remember, is not the percentage of the filled positions, it's the percentage of all positions. So it doesn't go lower than 85.7% of the positions being filled with the SATEP completed.
Okay. Now, well, when we're doing the review and extension of our strategic plan, it might be good if our next HR committee, we take a review of the metrics that exist now and revisit the data as to those metrics, because we haven't looked at it for a while.
That we did it last fall.
Last fall?
We did it on November 17th.
Okay, well, I'll go relook at those minutes, because I don't really recall it. Let me pull that, Allison, and take a look at it. Okay, any other questions on this subject? And the other thing is maybe we could work in the metrics for the other vacancy positions too. We had our last meeting, only if it makes sense, so as we review and extend the strategic plan, we can at least consider whether we should add metrics for the other highly vacant positions. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. That's an update on the status of the Department of Education employees on department-directed leave or leave pending investigation, including status of committee requests for information relating to DDL and LPI.
We just did a short PowerPoint that is tracking the continued progress on, in terms of the employees out on department-directed leave pending investigation. So first of all, what the first slide represents is that we continue to hold steady, see slight improvement in terms of the number of employees out on DDL, LPI at any given point in time. We, as of March 4th, we had 37. I think we subsequently had one more go off, but I don't know whether any new ones have come in. So we're as you can see, as I said, we're pretty much holding steady. The next slide is the length of time that employees have been out. So the length of time for all stages, investigation and decision making. So what you can see here is that we have 8 cases remaining where the employee has been out for more than a year. 5 where it's more than 6 months but less than a year, and 24 that are 6 months or less. So we're getting to the point where the vast majority of the cases are those in which the employee has been out on leave for 6 months or less. This last slide, I think, is the real success story so far, and that is for the 3rd month in a row, we don't have any investigations that are taking more than a year, and for the first time, we have no investigations that are taking more than 6 months. So we're starting to see the results of the training. We're starting to see really the results of the increased attention on these circumstances, and we're encouraged by these results. We will continue to make sure that every attention is given to investigations and decision-making when employees are placed on DDL-LPI. The other part of this agenda item is the information request that we provided several weeks ago, and that what we provided was the spreadsheet of all cases in which an employee had been placed on DDL or LPI from January 1, 2013 to the present, tracking through a number of different data points that had been requested, but the really tracking sort of the life cycle of what happens when an employee goes on DDL-LPI. So not just what happens in the investigation and decision-making, but also what happens afterwards. How many of these are grieved, or what happens when they are grieved. In the memo that accompanied the data, this was the February 19th memo, what we pointed out and what was also encouraging to me is that if you look at simply the number of employees placed on DDL-LPI for calendar year 2013, a total of 106 employees out of the roughly 22,000 or so had been placed on DDL-LPI at some point in the calendar year. The next year, 111. But for calendar year 2015, we had a total of 62. So what we are seeing, and again, I believe it's because of the increased attention, the new investigation guidance, the training that has been given to vice principals and principals, and that is, I think, better guidance in terms of what should be the consideration before even taking the initial step of putting an employee on DDL or LPI. So I think we're seeing improvements throughout the life cycle. We are taking the data, the spreadsheets that you have there, we're keeping that updated on a going forward basis, because our largest challenge in doing that was that a lot of that was not readily available, as I said in the memo. And so the amount of manpower, man-hours needed to even get that information to you was extraordinary and really impeded our work in a number of other areas. So on a going forward basis, well, it's still a lot of work because it brings in information not just from the data system, but from a lot of manual collection at different points, at least on a going forward basis. And by having now protocols in place to keep it updated on a monthly basis, it's not as burdensome as it otherwise would be, and that gives us the data to continue to work toward improvements.
Any questions? Mr. Williams.
A couple of things. One observation, heard a lot of testimony over the last couple of years about DDL, and a good portion of that testimony was an issue of principals being placed on DDL. But really, the spreadsheet that you're referencing doesn't show very many principals involved at all. We were told that there was just supposedly this climate of fear because so many principals are on eggshells, and frankly, I think the data just disproves that. The bigger concern is not principals being the object, but principals being the ones who are subjecting teachers to this process. I know that progress has been made. I hope that the efforts at training and everything are not just for your staff, but also for our principals, because most of the people on that list, unless you correct me, I'm pretty sure these cases are initiated by the principals. They're the supervisors of the teachers and the other positions that are listed.
Yes, if it is a teacher being placed on DDL LPI, it's the principal's recommendation that has to be approved by the complex area superintendent. But to your point, the way that the training was rolled out, Nanette O'Connor was the person who's been doing the training. She initially started with all of the vice principals, and sometimes principals were in on those meetings. Some principals' meetings, she was requested to come and do the same training. And the next phase that has been started is to go out and give additional training to the principals. And as a matter of fact, she, together with the AG's office and our labor relations staff, are going out and starting a round of training that really gets into not just employee investigations, but Chapter 19, but really emphasizes on the overview of appropriate investigation practices, but really these other issues that are within the principal's purview. What do you do in terms of anybody being placed on DDL LPI, and also what is to be considered in the decision making?
Okay, thank you. And a little bit more. Did you see Mr. Harlan's testimony?
Yeah, I saw the testimony. I don't have any information about his particular case.
I'm not going to ask you about his case, because according to the letter, he filed suit and there was a settlement, and I know that you wouldn't talk about the specifics of a case like that. But just take that case, those conditions as a hypothetical. I mean, and I understand that the DOE may contest some of the facts in the letter and all of that. I'm not judging this case, but it raises to me some questions. The threshold question is, if I'm a teacher and I did yell at a student and I did kick a desk, why would that be sufficient to put me on department director leave for 6 months to a year?
Exactly. That is not currently happening.
To me, even if that happened, that's not the way to handle it.
I agree. And what I did notice in the testimony, because I was looking to see if his case was on any of the spreadsheets that I had, that I would have more information. He said that he was placed on leave 3 years ago. So to me,
3 years ago.
Right.
It doesn't happen.
I think that's what he said in his testimony. So to me, the encouraging part there is, okay, we went from over 100 a year to now the 62 last year. And my belief is that it's exactly those sorts of cases that perhaps in the past where people must have, I don't believe that we had a bad workforce or a more bad workforce than that we have now. So I think that the variable has to be the judgment calls that are being made when employees are first being placed out on DDL LPI. And I do think, therefore, that the fewer number is representative of the fact that we do have a different set of expectations now and set of, as I said, the guidance in terms of what really is an appropriate circumstance to place an employee out on DDL or LPI.
And then another issue raised is that the investigator assigned, or whoever, I don't know if it's investigator, whatever it is, the person from that superintendent or CAS select should be unbiased.
I agree with that as well. We have had some circumstances in the last 6 months where my office has gotten involved in helping to identify an appropriate investigator, because the complex area superintendent felt that, this happened at least 3 times, felt that because of either the nature of the allegations, the people who might be witnesses, or the person or the position, that the resource that they would otherwise have used was not an appropriate use. And then that's where my office has helped identify who would be the best investigator under the circumstances.
So overall you're saying that we're doing a lot better now than we were 3 years ago, and you don't think a case like this, like what's described here, would occur?
It would not, especially because, remember, when the employee has been out for more than 10 days and then it gets elevated to the superintendent for extensions, Office of Human Resources investigation section, which is relatively new, then has a role, and that's where Nanette and her staff, but primarily Nanette, really looks to make sure that it looks like this is appropriate. And if not, she insert yourself into the process and make sure that, I mean, sometimes we get information, a description that simply will not be comprehensive, and then when she delves into it further, realizes there are some potentially very harmful, actions going on. So there's more of a system to oversee what happens with these cases, yes.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the numbers seem to indicate that we are doing better, and I appreciate that you're on top of it. Thank you.
Just following up on you, just to let you know, there was 5%. But I want to go back to the process. I understand we're improving on cutting down investigations, but what are we doing with the process? I mean, I understand we will be hearing from the regional workers. But I really think that that process has to be reviewed because of the due process and what's going on. I have a hard time believing that it's appropriate to say, don't talk to anyone, don't, or you will be punished more, things like that. And I think what happened was we lost a case, but my question is, now what happens to the people who are the ones that actually put these people in this position? Do we go back? Do we go back and talk to them? Do we go back and say, you made a mistake? Or is there some type of thing that goes on where we can, I guess, monitor the situation so it doesn't happen again? Or what happens after that?
So if I understand your question or your concern, it's if after the fact we find out if either an investigation is completed and there's no discipline, or...
No, yeah, you lost a case, like this Harlan case. You lost a case in court, okay? Decided to pay him out of court. My question is, what happens to the people who actually were the ones that put him under this investigation? Do we go back and talk to them? Do we improve that situation also? Are we looking at those things?
So first, my reading of the testimony was not that the case was lost.
We paid him money.
But, sorry, from having been a lawyer, I can tell you that doesn't mean that a case is lost. Very often that...
We're not going to discuss the specifics of a case in open session, but the bottom line is we don't have the specific facts before us. So we can generalize, and I don't think it's necessary that, I think Mr. Minn is trying to make a point, and the question is, really what it comes right down to is that if a person was deemed to have been put on DDL, LPI inappropriately, is the decision maker of the person who put the person on DDL, LPI counseled in any way?
I think it depends on the circumstances, because sometimes it's always a judgment call, yeah? And in retrospect, you always know more than you knew at the time. So there are some cases in which if you're not sure and there's a risk of harm to students, that employee is going to be put out. In other words, you err on the side of caution for protecting students. So I think there could be a lot of circumstances where at the end of the day, an employee is found not to be, whether it's not severe discipline or not discipline. And I don't think that those situations are appropriate to go back and say, you were bad decision maker. It's more you did the best you could at the time, but now you've learned from the circumstance. Perhaps next time you can ask better questions or more questions before putting them out. I'm sure that if there were a circumstance where a decision maker under whatever fact-finding was determined to have either been biased against the employee or acted out of an improper motive, then yes, I'm sure that there would be a return to that decision maker. So if it were a complex area superintendent, that's something that the deputy superintendent would handle. And if it were a principal, that's something the complex area superintendent would handle.
Anyone else have any other questions? I think it's important that we recognize that when this issue first came to the board's attention and we started putting it on the agenda, that the department did reflect on a suggested policy that you're presently in consultation that looked at what would be the circumstances under which a person would be suspended on DDL, LPI. And we had looked at other school districts. The department has studied it. So I think in retrospect, we've come to a better understanding of what would be appropriate conditions under which it could be, a person could be placed on such leave. I am still concerned, though, that the decision-making is still taking a long time. And the table that you provided does indicate how long the case has been, 12 plus months, but it doesn't indicate how long the decision maker has had the case in decision making. So I'm interested in knowing that, and I was somewhat half serious when I said, if the person in decision making has had it for a long time, we should make them come to executive session and explain to us why they haven't made a decision yet. And we have some of this, I think, is only recently been placed in decision making. Some of which have been there for a while. So the next time we have this on the agenda, I would like to know how long a decision maker has had the matter in decision making.
We'll do that. We'll break it down into length of investigation and
And I am more serious now that if it's a long period of time it's been in decision making, have the person responsible for making the decision come to an executive session, explain to the board why they haven't made a decision, or make a decision and avoid coming to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I have some information and numbers on the number of days of cases still in decision making, but I'll share that with you and Ms. Craig later.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Halagao.
Thank you for this information again, and I'm just wondering if any of this information is disaggregated according to complex area or geographic area, to see if there's any kind of patterns of anything in particular areas that we need to pay attention to.
We have broken it down that way. That's how we do it. For example, when we do the reminders and the follow-up, and there is no disproportionate impact based on complex area, based on district, based on classified employees versus certificated employees. We don't see any patterns like that.
Well, again, at least we're making progress. But I appreciate the analysis about what would be the appropriate circumstances for placing an employee on directed leave. I'm anxious to have that policy or procedures understood and adopted by the department. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, and that's committee action on Department of Education investigations, procedures, deadlines, and timelines for investigations, which is basically no recommendation due to present consultation.
Yeah, we're almost done with that. We're very hopeful. So we received comments from all three of the unions, HGEA, STA, UPW. We've responded to concerns, we've answered questions, and we're just completing a finalized draft. We've incorporated some of the comments or suggestions, nothing major, but to the point that as a courtesy, we'll be sending out the version showing the changes to all three unions this week. We're going to ask them to, if they can, please respond to us within 2 weeks with any final comments, concerns, questions. And assuming that process goes well, then within another couple of weeks, we'll be able to roll it out.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comment on that matter? Otherwise, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is committee action on declaration of annual reduction in force for classified employees to initiate collective bargaining and placement rights for employees displaced due to changes in staffing needs. And there's this memorandum that's been circulated. The chair will entertain a motion for approval. Okay, is there a second? We've moved in second. Any discussion? Ms. Craig, you want to tee it up?
Yeah, so for those of you, you may recall I was here last year at this time. So this is the time of year at which the principals, the schools will take a look at their plans for next school year based on projected enrollment and decide which positions are needed or not, and then they go through what we call the buy-sell process. So at each school, they have the discretion to determine which positions they need for staffing for the next school year. So based primarily on enrollment fluctuations each year, we've historically had a small number of positions that the schools no longer need. And so what happens is that we then come here, the board does this declaration of RIF, and that's the initial step that then allows us to work through the collective bargaining provisions in terms of placement for these displaced employees. So typically these are school level positions, but not always. You'll see on the list that we provided for this year, and if you want more detail, I have that available for executive session. But we also have some office employees in the same situation. And then after presumably the declaration, that we will then start working with the employees. We'll do the official RIF notice and look for placements for those employees in vacant positions, or depending on the position and circumstances, we do get into bumping of employees. We've notified HGEA, we've notified UPW that we do have displaced employees this year, just giving them the numbers, and they're waiting for us to come back with further details.
Okay, if members want to discuss this in executive session, we do have further material. We can do so. Otherwise, if you're ready to, Mr. Williams.
Chair, I don't think we need executive session. I mean, we've been through this a couple times, and really, this is, I mean, at first glance, you think it's negative for employees, but really, it's not. It's to initiate steps that will allow those employees to be taken care of.
Right.
And the other thing I want to remind us all is, you know, this is not an overall net reduction. It's by workstation. It's by location. So, you know, I don't think we need to look at who the people are, which would be what we would do in executive session.
Okay. And does anyone feel contrary? Otherwise, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carried. Okay, we'll move now to our next agenda item, which is executive session. Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for matters stated on the agenda. Is there a second? Second. Moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carried. We're in executive session.